Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. A big episode to end the week for you with IREN absolutely taking off in trading today, up in excess of 10% during this morning's session. We're going to be discussing why we think that is, recent news and analyst coverage as it relates to IREN. In addition to that, we got a big press release out from Hive to end out the week. A lot to talk about. Before we get into it, take a second, smash the like button, you guys. Big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comments section below if you're currently holding IREN and what you think is going to happen next with this stock. With that being said, let's get into today's video. All right, guys, TGIF, we made it through another week's worth of trading. A holiday yesterday for Juneteenth, so the markets were closed. Open today, though, and IREN making a big statement, Anthony. That's what we're going to be discussing in today's podcast. We also got some very good news out from Hive Digital Technologies. We'll be discussing that as well. Before we get into it, though, Bitcoin itself hovering right around that $104,000 range. Some peculiar trading, to say the least, over the last 24 hours. You can see on the 5-day chart here, Anthony, definitely some up and down movement.
Yeah, so we saw some movement in the Bitcoin price here on today, got to 106,500, but market opened and then we've just seen the price come down to 104,000 levels. So still within the band that we've talked about over the last 2 or 3 weeks, and it seems to be holding firm there. But with all the good news coming out, it's a bit of a head scratcher. We're not seeing anything other than the macroeconomic news and obviously the stuff that's going on in the Middle East at the moment, which isn't helping the markets. And obviously Bitcoin has impacted on what macroeconomic things are happening, but not to the extent that the markets have been affected at the moment.
Yeah, some interesting timing as well, almost like clockwork. As soon as the U.S. markets open up, that big dive we see on the chart here, Anthony. Now, in terms of the miners, IREN, obviously the standout on the board here, up 8.75%. It was up in excess of 10% in pre-market and early trading hours today. This one also a bit of a head scratcher, Anthony. We've talked about IREN extensively on the channel. We had that big interview with Dan Roberts just a few weeks back. We've talked about the fact that we may be seeing an HPC deal or something to do with Horizon 1. But as far as we can see, no news out today, yet the share price and the volume absolutely taking off.
Yeah, good volume, higher than its 3-month daily average already, and we're only literally 3 hours into markets at the moment, so that's good there. Yeah, and it's significant higher than the rest of the miners. Most of the miners are either flat or in the red at the moment, but IREN's showing some good advancement today, up as high as 10% in earlier trading, and only the likes of Corp have managed to keep up with IREN at the moment. They're also up about 8 to 9% today as well. So maybe something is in the HPC water as we speak.
So to speak. Core Scientific, unfortunately, not following suit. But yeah, CoreWeave again setting another new high, Anthony, nearing in on $180 per share. So that one quite incredible. Now, we put out a podcast last week talking about this IREN HPC deal. It seems everyone we talked to, from a retail perspective, from a Wall Street perspective, everyone is guessing or assuming that something is in the works for this Horizon 1. We also had Daniel Roberts on the podcast. He said based on what he can see in his position at that time, he would be surprised if they didn't have a deal for Horizon 1 by year end.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're in active negotiations with multiple customers. I mean, both in relation to Horizon, but also variations of Horizon, variations of our design, everything from turnkey delivery for their own design through to powered shells. So there is a broader conversation that encompasses the whole of Childress as well as Sweetwater bundled up in this. But to zero in on Horizon specifically, sitting here today, I'm highly confident we're going to contract that prior to completion in Q4.
So can you talk about, I guess, the feeling or the thoughts in the community right now? Why is IREN really at the front of the line, along with Cypher, in terms of the next potential HPC deal?
Yeah, and I mean we've talked about IREN a lot on the channel there. In terms of their Bitcoin mining, they're in that sort of top quartile of performing miners month after month for the last 3 or 4 years. They've been in the HPC space now for well over 12 months. They do an on-demand service at the moment, but they're obviously using some of that power now, and the creation of the Horizon One at the Childress site, to look for a co-location partner. The thing about IREN is if you look at their facilities, they're better built facilities than most of the mining companies out there. They don't just put up tin huts or anything like that. They've put a lot of thought into it. They are experiencing data center builds. So building HPC facility won't come as any sort of surprise to the likes of IREN. I was really impressed with the last podcast with Dan. I mean, he effectively said we'll have a client named in the last quarter of this year. So this is all geared up to Horizon One. And then they're also at the same time, they're putting work now into getting Sweetwater 1 and 2, which is going to take, a bit longer, maybe 18 months, 2 years to get those both energized. But that's 2 gigawatts of power. And we know at the moment there's a potential shortage of power going forward. IREN have been raising capital in readiness to complete what they're doing at the moment. They've already got the capital funded to deliver 50 exahash. That was their Bitcoin mining strategy. But now they're fully focused on using the remaining power at Childress and Sweetwater to deliver HPC. And to help with the completion of Horizon One, IREN have just literally closed out an upsized 550 million convertible note, literally end of last week there. Now, this has got a principal amount of 3.5% convertible senior notes due 2029, and it was, the original subscription was well oversubscribed. It was 450 million, then it went to 500, and they've got a 50 million green shoe. They're going to receive approximately 535 million after costs. And there is a 30% conversion premium associated with this. We talked on the previous podcast about the cap call, which effectively provides a hedge upon the conversions up to a cap price of about $20.98, which represents actually a 100% premium from when the actual announcement of the convertible was announced there. So they're filling a war chest up now, ready to sort of drive the expansion at Childress for Horizon One, and obviously get some of those key power conduits into Sweetwater 1 and 2 in readiness for potential clients to come to those sites there. I mean, this is only really the tip of the iceberg. I mean, if you wanted to start trying to write on the back of a fact packet how much these companies are going to raise, if you've got 1 or 2 gigawatts of power, 550 million is small change. You're going to need billions of dollars, but getting that Horizon One up there, getting a client in there, that puts them in really good stead. And bear in mind, last month, in terms of Bitcoin mining revenue, there were nearly a 70 million. I think it was 66 million in revenue just from Bitcoin mining. So they're also bringing in a real good cash flow in terms of their other business, and that's going to grow even more over the next few months as they achieve 50 exahash. So it looks like things are really good for IREN. Market obviously likes the company. Retail investors like the company. What could possibly go wrong from here?
Yeah, just incredible, Anthony, when you start talking about the cost of some of these facilities. And if we actually take a look at the slide out of their most recent investor deck, you can see that neighborhood of $6 to $7 million per megawatt of IT load.
Yeah, and if you look at the size of Horizon One, forecast to be about 50 megawatts of IT load, at the higher end there, that's 350 million, which is pretty much, when you think about the convertible note and the fees that have gone out and the amount they're going to use for cap calls, that pretty much covers that particular build process there. But that's 50 megawatts. I mean, they've got 2 gigawatts at the other sites there. So when you start thinking about the funding required for those, that's going to be significant more, because potentially you've got about 40 times the size of site. So you could be in the tens of billions if you were to fit them out with IT. But there are clients out there like Oracle, like CoreWeave, like some of the hyperscalers we've talked about, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft. They're all going to need significant power, and we've heard from many of the companies. There's not a lot of large sites available. So the companies like, IREN and Cypher and Bitdeer, who have these large sites, obviously Riot Platforms has 600 megawatts at the Childress site. They could be, in the queue to get, a really big client. But a lot resting on obviously get Horizon One up and running there, and let's then see the news come out to fulfil the rest of it. And actually, it might work well in terms of a planning process, because it's not a case of everybody wants it now, but everybody wants it over, say, the next 2 to 3 years. So it might be that IREN are really a good position with that Sweetwater, getting it ready for when the requirement's needed.
Yeah, and if we actually take a look at the Sweetwater graphic here, you can see $70 billion worth of GPUs and IT equipment can actually be sustained at that facility. So yeah, you talk about big numbers, Anthony. Definitely some big numbers there. Now, interestingly enough, we've talked a lot this week about the cost profiles of these companies. We talked about the hiring at CleanSpark, the various different sites. We've talked to the team at Riot looking to hire internally for the data center positions. In addition to the discussion around Cypher, IREN naming a client, we've also heard a lot of people inside the community talking about the data center expertise that both of these companies have built within their ranks as well, Anthony. So the human capital side of things, something we don't talk about a lot on the channel, but as Dan said on the last podcast, they're putting up 50 megawatts of data centers per month. That's something most companies just aren't capable of doing. And as you alluded to, these are high quality data centers.
Yeah, they are high quality when you compare to what many of their peers are using, and having a great team around. One thing that IREN have prided themselves on, over the last 5-6 years, is having the right people in the right place. It's not just about Dan and Will, the two co-founders, the two co-CEOs. It's having the team around to support them. So having that expertise. I remember one of their directors having, built some of the largest data centers in Canada, and having that expertise on the board at that particular time obviously gave them an insight into how they can deliver the likes of Childress. And this is as Childress was literally, a piece of land at the time. So you can see where it is now and how that expertise has helped them. But also, bringing in the right amount of staff to deliver these services in a timely way. I mean, they've managed to, grow really quickly, and also, be supported in that more than likely from, a lot of local communities. A lot of these mining companies go into remote areas, and sometimes it's areas where there was previous industries there, which have now sort of gone away. And so, you've still got staff who are qualified in delivering, data center expertise. We spoke to Sam Tabar last week on the podcast, and we raised this question with him, and he said, it's really important. You can't underestimate the quality of having really good staff and the ability to attract staff locally and do things for them local communities as well. I mean, some of these mining companies tend to be, the biggest employers in the area, and so it's a really good, a really good way to, keep the company and the community working in the same direction together.
Yeah, it certainly is. And we've got some news out from Hive, and they have a special portion talking about the community involvement in that press release as well. So back to IREN here, Anthony. It's not just us that's raising the flag in terms of a potential deal with IREN and also Cypher. Eric Jackson, he was just on Fox Business talking about HPC data center potential, the demand gap that we've talked about on the channel, and specifically called out both IREN and Cypher as real leaders and potentially companies to watch, or as they say, AI plays to cash in on for this upcoming cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. And he talked about, IREN and Cypher, and, they're the ones that potential. It was also interesting to say he's expecting, anything between a 10x and a 100x in the next few years. So, keep your eyes peeled. I mean, it's great to listen to other people give their price predictions. We tend not to go down that route on the channel. It can be quite controversial if you said that, the price should go to this amount and then it doesn't actually get there. But it's great to hear him. He's obviously got a lot of experience in the space, and a lot of people will be listening to that interview on Fox News there. And it was a really interesting take on the likes of IREN and also the likes of Cypher. Both of these companies producing really good data centers and are ready to move into that HPC co-location strategy imminently.
Yeah, they certainly are. And he also talks about Oracle in this discussion. So Eric Jackson actually runs an AI machine learning tech fund called EJM Capital. So interesting to see how some of these bigger institutional investors are now eyeing the miners for that top return profile. Our good friend Mike Alfred also put out a tweet recently that made me chuckle, Anthony, talking about the most undervalued plays in the entire market globally right now are Bitcoin miners that are about to sign an AI or HPC deal. So again, making reference, I would assume, to IREN as he sits on their board as well. So a lot of buzz in the community at the retail level as well. Anthony, our good friend Agrippa, obviously very close to the IREN story, put out a tweet today talking about some of the numbers. Again, no new or net new news, but some impressive percentages and ratios out of IREN from the retail perspective as well.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of this information on the channel, and IREN. We said, even on yesterday's or the day before's podcast, the last 2 quarters they've been positive, and you expect them to be positive this quarter. Not many miners can do that, have 3 positive quarters in a row, because Bitcoin has been volatile, and when Bitcoin's volatile, the mining stocks are even more volatile. And when you consider that, the majority of the revenues for these mining companies is Bitcoin, then you want the Bitcoin price to be less volatile to give you an idea of where your revenues are going to be. So I think this current quarter now, with the Bitcoin price where it is, and we've got literally 10 days to the end of the month, we're going to see some nice positions for most of the miners, because we've been in that wedge of 103, 104,000 up to 107,000 for quite a while now. So that's giving the miners really, really good revenues, and we expect them to deliver some better results than they did in Q1.
Yeah, it's a good point. Although we want Bitcoin to see those new all-time highs, even at this level, it's markedly better than any prior quarters, Anthony. Now, you and I have been covering IREN for quite some time, but the analyst community, as we just mentioned, has also taken note of this story. About a dozen Wall Street analysts or firms now covering IREN, which is interesting based on the growth that we've seen. This company, when they first approached you, I believe was about a half an exahash.
Yeah, they just literally IPO'd in the September. I spoke to Dan literally a couple of months after the IPO'd, and they've been part of my analysis, for, the last 4 years. So, and we've seen them grow massively in that period of time. And the growth is also obvious when you look at the list of analysts that support IREN in terms of all the big names are there. And I saw a post today, I think it was from Roth Capital, that their lead analyst, Darren Afterha, he's suggesting, I think, a price of over $20.50 for IREN at the moment. So again, let the analysts do that. That's what they're experiencing, giving price predictions. But he's suggesting IREN's pretty much undervalued at the moment, with the move now towards high performance compute. A lot of the analysts we've met in persons, and they're very much on the side of the miners going into HPC, because they can see that predictability. It's all about predictability. If Bitcoin was less volatile, I think we could make more assumptions. But as you say, before open today, it was 106,500, and by the time market opened, it had dropped within like 20 minutes all the way down to 104,000. So that's the volatility that you have just with Bitcoin. Mining stocks are far more volatile, and when we saw those, every miner was literally green pre-market, and now we're seeing majority of miners are in the red, as we've already explained. So these analysts, they like the predictability of HPC, and IREN potentially being one of the biggest players in HPC with the amount of power assets they've got. One can suggest that these analysts are going to be given some re-ratings towards that stock price in the very near future.
Yeah, that's what we're banking on, Anthony. The good old re-ratings and volatility we talk about so much on the channel. So being that you're the long-running expert on IREN, I've got a question for you now, Anthony. We've obviously seen the Horizon 1 renderings, the 50 megawatt liquid-cooled AI data center. We've shown this slide a number of times on the channel. However, Dan made reference to the potential of expanding Childress or Horizon to this entire site if needed, just simply moving the Bitcoin mining machines out. We've also seen renderings of this Project Horizon concept, and they specifically put a second slide right after the Horizon 1 initial slide talking about expansion potential. So my question to you, Anthony, is do you think Sweetwater is ultimately the large-scale campus goal here, or do you think the tides are potentially shifting at IREN and they're now looking at Childress as potentially that crown jewel site?
It's difficult to say. That what I would say is from the conversation that we had with Dan on the podcast there, and the fact that they're extremely bullish on HPC, and they're doing it from a fact at the moment it's showing, potentially a higher rate of return than Bitcoin mining. And we posed the question to him, if it was down to return investment, would they consider expanding their HPC at Childress? And he was quite clear with a yes, a very firm yes, which meant, either they would, move those mining machines to other locations, or maybe even just look to progress all their power towards high performance compute. So, very bullish stance to be in. I mean, obviously, again, we don't know what the price of Bitcoin is going to be next year or the year after, and so when if it's going to follow similar cycles, you're going to have 2 to 3 years of downtime in the cycle. So Dan's obviously very forward thinking. He's been in this data center space for a considerable amount of time. They're not just a Bitcoin miner. They've got a view on delivering high performance compute. They're already doing it from a on-demand service using their own GPUs, but they feel that the bigger opportunity is to have a big client co-locating on one of their sites, which they're really good at developing and building, and with the right client, the sky's the limit. So I think he's just keeping his options open there. But if the return investment supports HPC, then he may well determine that Childress will be better suited to deliver HPC than Bitcoin mining from a long-term perspective, because he feels that HPC is going to be here longer with us than the actual mining aspects of Bitcoin. If you think about the halving, it's going to happen in 3 years' time, and another halving in 7 years' time. The rewards starting to get reduced every 3 years. We've talked about that difficulty. The difficulty is impacting these miners like a second halving effectively. And so it's a real challenge. It's a real challenge. I think a lot of these miners, if you ask them, how long do they think mining is going to last? And we had Ben Gagnon, go back to the Ben Gagnon podcast. That was a really insightful podcast. Literally the day after the Dan interview, he suggested 2 to 3 years. He thinks that when we get past the next halving, it's not going to be economically, financially viable for miners in the space unless they've got literally free energy, or the Bitcoin price has really rallied. He thinks it's going to be a real challenge, and hence why Bitfarms are putting all their chips in towards developing HPC going forward. They're not going to grow the mining anymore now. And that seems to be the similar conversation with many of the miners. Bear in mind, 90% of them look like they're going into high performance compute, where you've got a couple of the big ones staying in the Bitcoin mining space, the likes of Mara Holdings and CleanSpark.
Yeah, very dynamic market to say the least, Anthony, and going to be interesting as this next halving approaches, almost flipping on its head, where the primary revenue stream for these companies was Bitcoin with secondary uses of the power. Now flipping on its head with the primary use being HPC AI and potentially using some of that backup or secondary power generation to mine Bitcoin where it makes sense. So with that being said, something definitely brewing under the surface at IREN. We've seen the convertible note. We've seen some updates on the renderings or drawings of the Horizon project. Now we're seeing some expansion potential news and the share price jump today. So something's going on there, Anthony. We can't quite put our finger on it yet, but we're sure it's coming. Now, speaking of IREN, this week, timely enough, leadership spotlight in the Power Mining Analysis newsletter, also looking at IREN. You can see the brothers there driving innovation in energy, AI, and Bitcoin. So make sure you sign up for that one. Anthony, if people want to take a read of that, what's the best way to sign up for the newsletter?
Yeah, just go to the website under news, go to the newsletter there, put your email address in, and you'll have access to every newsletter. And also, the newsletters are free and they are issued on a weekly basis. And every week we try and focus on individual from the mining community or from a company itself. This week, the leadership spotlight is on the two co-founders of IREN, which again, it's really timely. We sort of have a discussion at the beginning of the week what we're going to do. But there's been some really interesting ones over the last 4 or 5 weeks as well. So you can always go back and look at some of the previous ones. It's not just a newsletter covering the two leaders of IREN. It's also got all the news, all my articles that I write for Compass Mining in there. All the podcasts are also in there. So you've got quick access in the newsletter to link to every fund. We also put in which stocks are performing well, which stocks are not performing as well as they could be. So, and anything really newsworthy in the Bitcoin mining space, and also things that are happening in the Bitcoin space that will impact the mining space as well. So lots and lots of news. As I say, it's sent out on a Friday weekly. Sign up for it, and in this next few weeks, there's also a link in the newsletter towards the competition, which we're going to talk about next.
I was hoping you'd let me do that one. Miner Madness 4.0, Anthony. This is a big one. I can remember when you came up with the initial idea on the podcast for Miner Madness 1.0. Now we're into our 4th edition, almost a year in the running. This one's going to be bigger than ever. Obviously, a ton of swag and prizes available. We're also going to be doing something new this time around and featuring the winner on both the regular board and the leaderboard, or analyst leaderboard, I should say, on one of our special guest podcasts on the Power Mining Analysis YouTube channel. That'll go on the website. So inking yourself in Power Mining Analysis history there. And again, all of that's available on the website, powermininganalysis.com, through the newsletter sign up link. Now, we just talked about IREN. Obviously, they're on track for 50 exahash by the end of the month here, Anthony. The other one that's making aggressive strides in terms of exahash growth right now is Hive Digital Technologies. So they've been very good at communicating, being very transparent as they move through this upgrade process. Now coming out saying they've surpassed 11 exahash. They'll have the 25 exahash online by Thanksgiving.
Yeah, big update for Hive today. They've reached their target that they were going to expect to reach by the end of Q2. They've already reached it in advance, so they've surpassed 11. They've achieved 11.4 exahash in global mining hash rate, and this is at the Iguazu site in Paraguay. And this is really gets them, on track now to achieve that 25 exahash. Now they've announced, not by the end of the year, but to reach this goal of 25 by American Thanksgiving. So that's going to be 6-7 weeks earlier than probably expected. Now, what we've seen with Hive over the last sort of 5-6 weeks, they've literally been adding an exahash every week. So just as IREN were growing massively in that first quarter of 2025, and also through the second quarter as they get to 50, Hive have been doing something on a similar scale in terms of growing large hash rate in a very short space of time. So as that energization has been going on, the building's going up there, they've been putting more machines, obviously, and getting that hash rate over 10 exahash, and now over 11.4. So this is really good. The other good point about the update is the fact that Hive supports the local communities in Paraguay through a number of ways, and some of those ways are through job creation. Obviously, you're going to be looking for locally employed people. I mean, this is in Paraguay, not going to be transporting people from the US to do this. So we're looking for obviously technical, qualified people in the local area. They're also supporting some of the schools in the local area by providing energy to those schools to give them electricity, and also providing some public safety initiatives. Now, this is not unusual for any of the mining companies. I've been fortunate, and you've managed to go to a number of sites in the US. I've also been to some sites in other continents as well. And it's evident when you go to these sites that there's a lot of local people employed. There's also initiatives that go on there. We've talked about IREN. IREN do a lot of initiatives with their local people as well. Hive do a lot. I've been to their sites in Sweden as well, and what they do there for the ice hockey teams in Sweden and also for the local community. And bear in mind that that site is literally just outside the Arctic Circle. So, they have to literally use a lot of local people. Now, the great thing about that site is, as one of Hive sites, is it's sat in what I would call a technological area. So there is like a university up there that delivers a lot of skills, in technology. If any of you used an app on your iPhone called Candy Crush, that was developed in the same area that Hive have got their facilities. So that's probably one of the most used apps globally over the last few years. And so that just gives you an indication that the type of people that have been trained and go through their training in northern Sweden, and Hive have basically been able to utilize people that have done the training up there to support their sites. And this is just another example in Paraguay of what they're doing there. Now, the co-founder and executive chair of Frank Holmes, along with the president and CEO, Aidan Killett, have highlighted the project's strategic and sustainable value, and they're emphasizing the strong local partnerships and long-term growth potential. This is what the retail investors have been waiting for Hive for many years now, and it looks like they're going to deliver this massive increase in hash rate, certainly on a scale that what we saw from the likes of IREN and CleanSpark back in 2024.
Yeah, great to see that one continuing to progress. Now, we've updated our table from earlier this week, Anthony, talking about the potential growth profiles of these miners. So my question for you here, are you confident that IREN will hit the 50 this month? And are you confident Hive will hit the 25 by Thanksgiving?
I'm confident both will. Again, it goes down to the fact that, we're talking about one site. So both companies know what they need to do. Both companies know about the pitfalls of not reaching their target. Remember, Bitfarms in 2024 didn't get to their target by the end of the year. It was a very ambitious target, but they just, for a number of reasons, didn't get there, and they've now sort of like really changed the strategy to move to HPC. But the market didn't appreciate the fact that they're given a big target and then not achieve it. And I think IREN and Hive have had plenty of opportunities to say that it might take longer than necessary. They haven't done that. They've kept updating literally every few days, saying everything's on track. I would have liked to have seen an update from IREN to say, they're getting closer to, say, 45 exahash. But you know what? We might just get an interesting update at the end of the month, which says they've achieved slightly more than 50 exahash. So I think both are on track to do it. I think they'd be silly to delay at this point in time, because the market would feel that's a failure.
Yeah, I tend to agree there, Anthony, with that sentiment, and agreed that we should hear something, if not multiple things, from IREN in the next week or so here. Now, to round us out and bring us home here, Anthony, if we jump over to the Hashprice index, a couple interesting numbers here. So you can see Hashprice itself down from the highs a few weeks ago when we were near the 57, 60 kind of range. We're in the $52 range. It is trending up slightly. You can see the extent of my technical analysis there, Anthony. But nice to see on the horizon, we've got a difficulty adjustment reduction scheduled in 8 days' time as well.
Yeah, so at the moment, the average block time is 10 minutes 20, so that's taking too long, 20 seconds too long to complete a block. So the next difficulty, if it stays like it is at the moment, will make things slightly easier for miners to achieve that 10-minute expected time frame. And if you look at the network hash rate, which is always a good indicator as well, look at the 7-day average there, 875. Well, we've already gone over 1,000 exahash last month, so pull back a little bit from there. But to have two mining difficulty back to back coming down will help the miners. We've had such an increase over the last 18 months. It's been a real challenge for mining companies. Look at what some of the companies were mining in January last year with less than a fraction of the hash rate they've got now, and they're mining nowhere near those totals literally less than 18 months further on. So we've had a halving, but the difficulty is a real problem for miners. And so this is a little bit of a relief in terms of they're still able to mine their expected planned Bitcoin throughout the month because the difficulty isn't increasing, and taking full advantage of the fact that the Bitcoin price is over 104,000. That's going to help them as well.
Yeah, not often we see back-to-back difficulty reductions. I don't think I can ever recall that since we've been working together, Anthony. It seems to only be going one direction. Now, if we look at the forward or hash rate forward curve here, you can see some optimism there as well, with July targeted to be the highest in the near future here.
Yes, it's obviously their forward thoughts on the way the hash price is going. July expected to be the highest, but obviously the unknown is we don't know what happens with Bitcoin. If they're following previous cycles, maybe they're using some of that there. But I've seen a lot of experts in the area asking, are we close to the end of the bull cycle? And they're saying no, we expect to go higher from where we are now. But the really is it's the challenge is it's uncertainty. So I think these type of models are quite prudent. And so they'll err towards potentially the downside rather than the expectation that we could see further rises. But if the miners are getting $54 per petahash per day, that will hopefully give them enough to make a reasonable margin.
Yeah, hopefully it will. So in closing, you guys, some optimism, especially for Mike Alfred, saying Bitcoin is due for a 50% correction. He's thinking July could be that month. And as soon as I saw that forward hash curve chart, Anthony, I thought back to your comments yesterday saying if this were like last cycle, we could be looking at September as potentially kind of the end of this bull run. So interesting to see how that lines up with the chart as well. With that being said, you guys, let us know your thoughts on IREN in the comment section below. Do you think they're close to inking a deal? Were they going to hit this 50 exahash by end of month? And are you currently holding shares? If you're still watching, hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe. Make sure you sign up for the newsletter, and we'll see you back here on Monday.